So, welcome everybody. Today's show is called How to Recover from Exercise, and I am joined here with Dr. Andy Galpin. Andy is a tenured professor at the Center for Sports Performance at California State Fullerton. He's a lifelong athlete, played collegiate football, competed in weightlifting, MMA. His current focus is sports nutrition, exercise physiology, exercise programs, and applied strength and conditioning. He co-authored a book recently. It's called Unplugged. You can find his book, his work, all of that at his website, andygalpin.com. He has a great YouTube channel as well. Andy, welcome to the show.
That's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that great and elaborate introduction.
Maybe you could give people a little bit of an idea about what academics looks like these days for someone like you. Is it a great time to be in academics with exercise, physiology, sports nutrition? Is it a terrible time? Meaning, do like the YouTube gym bros cause you problems? Do they create more interest? What is it like in terms of publishing, research, education right now in this environment?
That's a hard question to answer, honestly. I don't think I've ever been asked that. Um, I would say my initial reaction is it's always great. There is a interest in the public in getting better as a human, and that's always good for our work. Yeah, there's a lot of noise out there in the space. That's probably the most frustrating thing.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, um, a lot of the time the noise is helpful. A lot of times they're correct and we're not. That's there. They're on things that we haven't studied. They tend to guide research in some direction. That comes with a lot of woo-wooery and a lot of snake oil salesmanships and things like that. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, whatever, man. I generally love my job, so I'd say it's great.
And I only know you through online. This is our first time meeting, but it seems like you've been in academia for a while. With YouTube and crowdsourcing and communication and things in academia, has there been the ability to crowdsource data sets in ways that you couldn't do before, whether it's recovery or pain testing or things like that? Is there any interesting breakthroughs that have happened in your tenure?
Well, yes and no. I mean, if you look at the classic example is 23andMe.
Right.
And that's exactly what they did, right? So they had people pay them so that they could create a whole bunch of data. And scientists have actually learned a tremendous amount because they have now millions of people with DNA data, and we've never had that before. So 23andMe has allowed people in the genetics world to make extraordinary gains, and they're able to basically what happens is this: 23andMe can then have a ton of DNA data and say, hey, look, we're finding an association between the people who sneeze when they see the sun and this genetic polymorphism. And that's something that science would have probably never taken the time to look at because it's not a disease, it's not like anything else. And so they're able to generate a fairly strong hypothesis. But then the scientists can come and say, well, actually, let's run that and let's figure out mechanisms of how it's working, why it's working. Oh, it turns out, I don't know if that case is true or not, but it turns out that's correct. And that has happened several times because of 23andMe. So they can draw connections between things that scientists would have never even thought really to look at, and probably would not have been funded to look at because it's exploratory and there's not traditionally funding only comes when you have like, well, this and this and this and this. So we think this is happening. They don't really allow you to sort of just play all the times.
Sure.
Which has done there from the sports science world, though not really, because there's too many confounding variables to do that thing. It works with genetics because you have millions of data sets under extremely tight regulation.
Yeah.
Right? So from the sport performance side, no, but like I said, they do. Where it is helpful for us is they can put bigger numbers to things. So a classic example of this is what's known as velocity-based training. So picture strength training, but instead of doing a set number of repetitions or a weight, you measure the velocity of the bar or the dumbbell, and you train towards a specific velocity because in sport performance, that's typically more important than, say, just a random number. Well, that had some good science behind it, but then so many people started using it as practitioners, and the feedback started rolling in, and you're like, okay, there's really something here. So let's do more science, or it's showing, it's matching. So anytime you see the practitioners matching up with the same sort of outcomes as the science is saying, then that gives you just a lot more confidence to think that there's something actually there. So that is the part. The other part I'd say that's different now about science than it was 10 years ago is the fact that most science just died in journals.
Right.
Well, now it's quickly shared. And if you have
Yeah.
people, with that are scientists, but that have reasonable social media followings, it's a lot easier to get ideas out there.
Yeah.
Then they can be quickly refuted or they can be tested by folks. So that
Sure.
has made science go at a much faster pace than it would have before.
For a lot of people, PubMed has been this kind of wealth of information, but it's kind of gone sideways too, where I feel like a lot of people come up with a hypothesis and then they go searching for bad science to back it up. What is your idea in terms of the next phase? Because like you said, initially the cool thing was finally we can just have access to this research that people spent so much time and money, sometimes public sector time and money on. Suddenly we can have access to it. But there's a lot of crap out there too. And it's really difficult for someone who's not an academic like me to sift through and separate the wheat from the chaff. How do you think about maybe a next phase, maybe even a pay to play market, something? Because this is what I see a lot in the health space: is people come up with a thesis, they go digging for bad science, and a lot of it's really old, and a lot of it's been debunked, but still all available. And they link up to 20 reference papers and kind of looks legit, but anyone who's really in the know knows that science has kind of been refuted. Do you have any ideas about what might happen in terms of technology, whether it's a thumbs up, thumbs down, a Reddit style bumping up of papers, or anything that could happen?
No, because you have problems with that as well. Um, you're on to the right point here. What I think has to actually happen is because it's, even from my side, it's extremely difficult for me to go through research and figure out anything besides what's in my direct small lane of massive expertise.
Yeah.
So you move even slightly off track from me, and I
Yep.
can't tell if two scientists are arguing.
Yep.
So people in the general public, you guys have no chance.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have no chance. And I've seen plenty of times where you pick your poison, whatever side of the equation you're on. You could go through and find somebody who's debunked all this science, and you can find someone who's debunked all that.
Yeah.
So I don't even honestly play that game too much because you'll never catch up.
Yeah.
I think the model of how we approach human performance has and is going to change, and that's going to solve a lot of our problems. And the shortest, the most concise way I can say this is, in my academic training and for how we've been training scientists for at least the last, I'd say, 40 years, is they want people to be highly specific and highly siloed in their approach.
Mm.
And that's great because that allows you extreme depth, and nothing can go really past your eyes. You don't make as many mistakes, etc. The issue with that is when we try to take whatever we're learning in that space and unfold it into the human experience, it just doesn't translate.
Yeah.
So the problem is we have got to stop approaching science as only a siloed thing. We need the silo, because the only way we're going to figure out how cancer cells are growing, whatever, is for someone to do nothing but that at such an incredibly high level. But we also need to come back and say, okay, we've got this model. We think this is happening. Now let's put it into practice, and let's account for sleep. Let's account for nutrition. Let's account for mental health. Let's account for hydration. Let's account for all these things in a single model. And that has to happen, or else none of it matters to the human experience. That's where I think we need to get to with human performance. And so this is what we've been trying to do. And I guess I can give you a couple of examples.
Sure.
We recently ran one study, and just call it a nutrition study. And typically this model is what we call a randomized controlled trial. So you think that eating peanut butter makes you grow more muscle, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, great. So let's take everyone and let's randomly decide, are you in the peanut butter group or are you in the control group? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I think that model is atrocious because it's great for drug testing and a bunch of other things. But humans don't randomly decide to do things. You go into, you make a change in your diet, you make a change in your training, your lifestyle, because you think that thing is better.
Yeah.
So we need to do more studies where we don't do randomization, that we do selection. So here's the case for peanut butter. Here's the case against it. Which one, Lucas, would you like to choose? Which one do you think is going to be better for you? You think the peanut butter group's better? Fantastic. You're in the peanut butter group. And let's go until we find enough people in both groups. And now we can account for, yes, you don't know if it's intervention or it's placebo, but in the real world, that's what matters.
Yeah.
If the peanut butter really did matter that much, it has to matter more than the combination of belief and peanut butter. Because if it doesn't, even if it has an effect, it won't really actually matter. Small things like that. And then again, accounting for, okay, you're in the placebo or you're in the peanut butter group. Did you grow more muscle? Great. But what also happened? Did you have GI distress the whole time? Well, that's probably important to know. Did it affect your sleep? Did it make you sleep better? Interesting. So maybe you didn't grow much more, maybe slightly more muscle, but you slept way better. And your satiety, and you gain more body fat. So everything has a pro and a con. There's no perfect solution. And so I think people need to understand, as we look at you as a complete system, here's what's going to happen when you do this. Most likely you'll get A, B, and C, but here were the downsides, here are the upsides. People reported this. We also found this measure and whatever other stuff. And so again, that's what I mean. We have to do studies where every part or as many parts of the system can be asked at once, and not have to say, well, a separate study from a sleep scientist found this, and then a separate study from an epidemiologist found as much of this stuff into a single control. Let's do these big studies with multiple groups, with multiple things, and treat them like a human. And if things don't pass that full human experience, then people don't really care. It's not really going to change lives.
Yeah. I wanted to chat a little bit about pain with you today and recovery, injuries, soreness, all of the above. These things in health and wellness seem to go in cycles. You know, it's like I got really into keto in 1999. Suddenly keto's back. It's like the big thing, you know. Ice baths are suddenly everywhere. Everybody's icing just constantly. They're buying big tubs and sticking themselves in it. And it's not about like good or bad. It's all interesting. It's all interesting. But like appropriate use is really something that I think is people really struggle with. And this kind of loops back to your peanut butter thing. What are you trying to do? You know, you're trying to, is it muscle hypertrophy? Is it weight loss? Are you trying to eat more dietary fat? What are you trying to do? My listeners are non-athletes. They're health and wellness seekers. They're people who want to be healthy. They're not trying to build massive amounts of muscles or win races or anything like that. And they have pain, back pain, rolled ankles, shoulder pain, chronic middle-age stuff. And people are constantly confusing pain relief with healing. So I kind of wanted to start there. I'll give you a real life example just so we can have some color and context. I smashed my toe on Sunday, and as one does, you go to Dr. Google and start searching around, and immediately you find RICE, rest, ice, compress, elevate. And I'm like, oh wow, this is 1980s stuff. And then you find ibuprofen, and then you find this and that. And it's not that any of that's wrong, but it's like what I'm trying to do is figure out how I can not put my foot in a boot for the next 6 weeks and heal at the same time. And so again, try to determine what to do. And I find, as somebody who works in yoga studios and trainings and things like this, is people usually equate lack of pain with healing. And because of that disconnect, like it just muddies the water. It makes conversations about healing so complicated. So people go for a long run and then ice their knees for 3 hours. And because they don't hurt, they feel like they healed them. Or they, go and do a bunch of gardening on the weekend, take 600 milligrams of ibuprofen because it doesn't hurt. They feel like they've got this sort of yin yang balance. How do you help kind of average people, non-athletes? It's a different conversation if somebody's trying to, deadlift 500 pounds. But for somebody who's just trying to manage their physiology for a health span kind of perspective, how do you help people think about pain management, aches and pains, normal bodily stuff that keeps them from the activities they like to do?
This is an incredibly complex question. We probably need a few hours. So my head there's so many things that I want to bring up. I'm not exactly sure where I want to start. What I'll say is how I approach this problem, because scientifically we are still yet to really understand pain. Injury is quite different. Like you're saying, that is something that's reasonably easy to define. Scientifically, pain is not. The reason is injury is a physiological experience or physiological item. You have tissue I can see in a microscope, it is damaged. They have markers that get released from tissue.
Yeah.
Pain is perception. Now, it's not that it's fake, but it is a neurological signal that's going there. And we can see, oftentimes, for example, when you first experience an injury, a lot of times the amount of physical damage is fairly well correlated to the amount of perceived pain. As you re-injure that same spot, those become disassociated. And so you see extremely high or even higher levels of pain without the same amount of damage. And this is a classic example of low back pain. The
Mm.
first time you hurt your low back, it probably hurt, 7 out of 10. And you probably had a decent amount of injury there.
Sure.
Anyone who's had low back pain, though, you can be at a 10 out of 10 on your back, and the next day be back to 2. Well, clearly you didn't do 10 out of 10 of damage. It's simply a pain signal. And so you have a classic sensitization there, a protection. And so, yeah, you do need to disentangle injury versus pain signal. And something like in the case of low back pain, you need to work to desensitize the tissue, not recover from an injury, because there is no, in this case, most likely there's no injury actually there. It is a protective mechanism. It is a signal. It is saying, hey, last time this happened, it really hurt us. So therefore, we want to lock you down and stop you from moving right now. And so a classic mistake with low back pain is drugs, ice, rest, right? Especially chronic low back pain.
Yeah.
What you want to do is action, activity, movements right below the threshold of massive pain, and to reduce the sensitization there. And eventually over time, it'll get less and less sensitive.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the pain will go away. You didn't actually fix any injury because almost surely you don't have anything.
Yeah.
So the way that I approach all this stuff, and just to wrap up, I guess my answer is always go back to first principles. All right. So in the case of, are you trying to relieve symptom? Or are you trying to relieve or recover from actual injury? Right. In the case of the rice, where that became a problem was it was mostly relieving symptom, and the science has now gotten to a place where we realize actually you may be slowing down the physical recovery process, but you're relieving symptoms. And so there are instances in my life in which the symptom is more important than the recovery. And there are instances when that's not the case. And so, like you said, you have to ask yourself, like, what are you optimizing for right now? What's your situation? What's your context? If you're having to take, ibuprofen every day to get through a yoga class, well, maybe if you have an acute injury that's so bad, say your back hurts so bad, but you need to get through yoga class, maybe that's not the worst thing. Maybe you spend 3 or 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden the back starts getting better because not moving is probably the worst thing.
Yeah.
But eventually, if it's taking longer than that, then we're saying, okay, now you're just covering up the pain. You still have dysfunction. You need to fix the dysfunction. So I guess what I'm saying is if you're using the symptom relief as a stopgap so that you can fix dysfunction, then I'm totally cool with it. But if you're just using it so you don't have to address the dysfunction, that's when we have problems. And that's what I meant by saying first principles.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I think a lot of people don't get clear on their objective. If you're trying to heal, like right now, for example, let's say I've got a fractured baby toe. If I took 600 milligrams of ibuprofen, I could go for a run. But I promise you, it's going to be September before that thing's fixed if I go for a run. But I could really do it. I could go for a run. But if I listen to that pain, I can just hobble around like a semi beat up person. I'm guessing I'll be able to run in 3 weeks. That's my guess. Today it's dramatically better. But I don't even want to take ibuprofen around the house because I use my body all day long. And, if I take it, I will do something. I'll do a squat. I'll pop up on my toes. And so I think it's really, really difficult to understand when pain is your body speaking to you in this really intelligent language that we've yet to really understand. And when pain, like you said, is just completely dissociated from anything and it's just causing you misery. And because of that, it becomes a really, really difficult thing to manage.
Yeah, I agree. It's a challenge. But the way that I address it is the way that I just mentioned is being clear. What are we trying to optimize for? What are we giving up? And that's the best guiding light I could give.
Let's touch on this ice thing because this is there's just massive ice movement right now. I see people literally posting on Instagram. They go out for a 150 kilometer cycle and then they're in an ice bath straight away. They run a marathon. They're jumping in ice baths. They're trying to optimize. They're posting their time in ice as if that's a accomplishment of some kind, and maybe it is. I'm not sure what they're optimizing for, but you're working with a lot of people who are looking for muscle hypertrophy, sports performance, all of these kinds of things. How do you think about appropriate use of ice in that context?
Well, I love the ice. No question about it. I have one 15 feet away from me right now.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. Like one of the things we've spent a lot of energy on the last couple of years is helping people use it appropriately. And it's not good for every situation, every circumstance. In fact, those that are interested in maximizing hypertrophy, about the worst thing that you could do is to hop in the ice bath after lifting weights. We know very clearly that will block a lot of muscle hypertrophy. And so directly out the gates, that's a misapplication of it. I would say with one of the companies that I work with called XPT, we use it a lot. And we use it in all of our in-person experiences. And I would say it is a similar crowd to yours.
Yeah.
No, rarely athletes, nobody there trying to maximize muscle growth. And the reason we use it, I mean, there's so many, but one of the ways we use it is it's a fantastic way to practice breath control under duress.
Yeah.
So we put people in there, you immediately start overventilating, you start panic breathing and all that. And it's a great way to put you, and again, in physical duress. And now we can work on diaphragmatic breathing. We can work on CO2 tolerance. We can work on all of these things while getting a physical experience. And it's just really hard to simulate panic in any other way that's not dangerous.
It's safe. Yeah. That's a great point. Safe. Yeah.
And you get out, you feel incredible. You feel accomplished. It's a mental challenge. It's being present. It's all these things where we can say, can you focus on this particular instant? No, I can't meditate. Really? Let me throw you nice. I bet you can really focus on the moment.
Yeah.
So there's all of these things we can get out of ice. It's not just the, trying to recover from sort of injury. That's one use of it. There are some physiological benefits.
Yeah.
There are many, and we do use them. Some athletes and some we don't. But like I said, there are some of the ways that we use it and have used it over the past that are maybe not what people are thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, I've been using cold and heat shock therapy for long before I knew there was even good research about it. But I guess what I see a lot of people on my Instagram feed using ice to do is abuse the hell out of their body and then jump in a bath and feel like, there's somehow the quicker they get in there, the less damage they're going to do. It's almost like the IV vitamins that people take after their night of binge drinking. It's just, it's how about you skip both?
Yeah. You're not going to win that exchange ever. Your joints you'll never win that.
Yeah. No. And you tell people what you're working on. I know you have a new book. Tell people what you're excited about in 2021. Are you guys back open? School's open? What's going on in your life? What are you excited about?
We're not open yet.
Okay.
We're California, so we're going to be dead last. So I don't know. Hopefully we'll be back in the fall. So research wise, I don't have much to offer here because we don't know. So we're going to pick up some stuff. We've got a bunch of interesting things to work with. But in the meantime, we have been working on, we completed one study using breath work in teens in high school. So this is basically something we implemented over Zoom and to try to manage stress.
That's amazing.
It was really, really interesting. And we hope to, we had a nice pilot study on that. And now we're looking to do more work in that area. And so many folks are interested in supporting, getting breath work in as a part of school systems for kids. We want to go into the high schools that have more problems, low SEO and all that stuff and more difficult areas and see if we can make some change in folks' lives by just doing 5 minutes of breath work kind of a day. So if you're looking for donations, you can check out the Healthy Human Performance Foundation. That whole nonprofit is dedicated towards breath-related work and supporting stress management, mental health, kind of physical health, all this stuff. So that's something we're going to continue working on. Then, of course, I'll continue to make stuff on YouTube for free and educate as much as I can, trying to outsource basically university education on nutrition, strength and conditioning, programming, all this stuff to get that high quality, science-backed, but useful information out there. So that's pretty much what I'm going to focus on. And then the last piece is I've got a whole bunch of athletes competing for world championships in the next 4 or 5 months. So that's going to take
exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. So
Well, perfect. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I'll definitely point people in the direction of your book and your YouTube channel. I know a lot of those resources you put out will be really valuable for our listeners. So appreciate your time. Let's keep in touch.
Okay, thanks, man.